The Bachelors of Egypt is a contemporary novel set in Egypt 2011, with a timeline starting on September 2011, about 8 months after overthrowing the former president Hosni Mubarak, with main focus on characters' social interactions within the Egyptian society. Dialogues, incidents, and unique aspects of the Egyptian culture could all be used to reflect on human lives elsewhere. Modern Egypt. Within this brief era of enlightenment, 2011-2012, all taboos were brought on the tables of discussion. An increasing appetite for political participation led to an increasing interest to know, with booming figures of internet usage and book readership, philosophical approaches and views of historical figures like Socrates, Plato, Machiavelli, Nietzsche found their place within such discussions, as highlighted in Philosophical Legacy, The Bachelors of Egypt. In this essay, 1. An 18 Days Revolution, Revolutions 101. Revolutions are indeed a hot topic for global media networks, usually portrayed as an attractive act of change, bringing hopes for a better future. The Egyptian Revolution of Jan the 25th, 2011 was dominating the leading news networks, such as the BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera. It was in fact the most popular incident in modern Egypt. A series of protests with a few participants across governorates of Egypt started on January 25th, 2011. Numbers of demonstrators kept increasing until it reached a peak on Friday, January 28th, also known as the Friday of Anger. Clashes with the police forces all over the nation have led to their sudden absence, after being defeated by groups of civilians. People had to gather and protect their own neighborhoods, while others remained at Tahrir Square in Cairo and other squares across Egypt, protesting against Mohammed Hosni Mubarak's regime. On February 11, 2011, the former President Mubarak was overthrown, or delegated his authorities to the Supreme Council of Armed Forces. The country was completely paralyzed between June 28, 2011 and February 11th of the same year. Excessive celebrations of Egyptians all over the world, and media's over-glorifying of the 18 Days Revolution, have led most of its supporters to believe that it was all over, and they have already won the battle against the regime. In an ironical, unprecedented scene, people were celebrating the success of the revolution after Mubarak delegated his powers to the Supreme Council of Armed Forces, SCAF, despite the fact that all of the SCAF's generals were appointed by Mubarak himself and have been serving under his leadership for a long period of time. Over time, many Egyptians started to realize that getting rid of Mubarak didn't essentially imply any changes with his regime. The man left his place at the top of the system, but the system itself remained, which caused the repetition of "down with the system" and "down with the SCAF" chants within various revolutionary incidents post-Mubarak's removal. It's absurd to pick 18 days of the year and call them a revolution. It takes years to bring a system down. It's either a long civilian sit-in that overthrew a president, or a revolution that we're currently living within its duration. Ali Adel, September 2011, The Bachelors of Egypt. Plenty of revolutions have influenced the lives of human beings on this planet throughout history, forcing changes within certain nations that had great impact on people and regimes within different states. One can't help but compare new revolutions with the old ones, while using the second group for benchmarking. The Cuban Revolution, led by Fidel Castro, a lawyer back then. General Batista overthrew the president on March 1952. After more than a year of preparation, Castro attacked military barracks in Santiago on July 1953. Castro was defeated, arrested, and sentenced to 15 years of jail time. General Batista released Castro in 1955 just to show off his power. Castro formed a new group of rebels and was defeated again on December 1956. Castro fled to Sierra Maestra, southeast Cuba. He finally won a guerrilla war on January 1959. Batista was forced to resign and flee the country when more than 500 of his associates were executed. Castro announced himself the Prime Minister of Cuba and eventually became the president. The Supreme Council of Armed Forces was ruling the country for almost a year and a half, between February 11, 2011 and June 30, 2012, when the newly elected President Mohamed Morsi took office, who was also overthrown after a year of presidency on June 30, 2013. 24 in January 2011, the beginning of protests against Mubarak's regime. 28th of January 2011, the disappearance of police forces, post-clashes with citizens, and the beginning of the country's paralysis phase. 11th of February 2011, former President Mubarak delegated his authorities to the Supreme Council of Armed Forces. March 2011, Mubarak was finally declared to face trials after a few protests. 80 April 2011, another peaceful sit-in at Tahrir Square was uniquely differentiated as 15 military soldiers and officers joined the demonstrators' side until they were all arrested to face military trials. September 2011, military tanks ran over protesters, a significant state of chaos in a demonstration organized by a few Christian political activists at the time. 18th of November, 25th of November 2011, continuous clashes between military forces and policemen on one side and protesters on the other, with endless numbers of casualties. December 2011, another peaceful sit-in, with more civilians dragged on the streets and more bloodshed. February 2012, a football game between El Ali Club and El Masri Club turned into a massacre with more than 75 of Ultras Ahlawi fans dead. Are all revolutions good revolutions? Revolution is a term that has maintained its popularity and reputation over the years, a word that usually stands for hope, justice, and liberty, all combined with its regular association with economic and societal reforms while restructuring a new nation. No one can possibly deny the excitement of most citizens during a revolution, yet the impact of such revolutions may only be properly analyzed after years. For instance, the Cuban Revolution successfully ended General Batista's tyranny, but after a few years of leading the country, Castro announced himself the president for life, executing and imprisoning those who dared to oppose him while building his own new dictatorship. Before winning against the former tyrant, Castro helped inform, educate, and mobilize various groups of rebels in Cuba's neighboring countries. At least some of those rebels believed in justice, or genuinely thought they would be able to make the world a better place by supporting Castro. A lawyer leading groups of regional citizens to overthrow the head of the Cuban state, the head of the Cuban army at the time, could only be called a revolution, yet substituting a dictator with another doesn't seem to be worth the bloodshed during the 7 years of combat. As highlighted in Ali's quote, it was unrealistic to declare one side victorious after 18 days, especially that the regime's practices were proven to remain in place long after Mubarak's removal. When the next president, Mohamed Morsi, was overthrown on July 3, 2013, as a result of the June 30, 2013 revolution, global media and heads of most of the world's states perceived it as a military coup, mainly because Morsi was the first elected president. The Egyptian government has spent years trying to convince the world that it was a revolution, and spent fortunes over global PR agencies' campaigns and various trade agreements with developed countries to gain international recognition from their governments and credibility among the citizens of the same nations. In fact, during both revolutions, incidents, or whatever you would like to call them, that occurred on 25 January 2011 and 30 June 2013, the army was the main player, and its generals were in charge of making the final decisions. One of the main factors contributing to the initiation of the first revolution was Mubarak's unannounced, unofficial, heavily promoted plan to name his son Gamal Mubarak, the president of Egypt after him. The inheritance of power, even through means of elections, was heavily resented by many civilians, and it was considered a despiteful thought for the army leaders. Simply stated, Egypt has only been led by military figures since 1953. Excluding Mohamed Morsi June 2012, June to 13, Mohamed Naguib 1953-1954, Gamal Abdel Nasser 1954 to 1970, Anwar el-Sadat 1970-1981, Mohamed Hosni Mubarak 1981-2011, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi 2014-present. As a former fighter and a military figure, Mubarak was honorably kicked out and was even saluted for his long years of serving the country at times of war and peace by the same military officer who announced that Mubarak delegated his authority to the Supreme Council of Armed Forces. On the other hand, Mohamed Morsi was kidnapped in 2013. The former president was kept in an unknown place under the commands of his former Minister of Defense, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, when his authorities were constitutionally transferred to the head of the highest constitutional judicial court in Egypt. Due to the global popularity of the term revolution, the state had to work on persuading the world that it was a revolution, just like the popular John 25th revolution of 2011. According to Ali from the Bachelors of Egypt, you can't pick 18 days of a year and call them a revolution. Yet, according to many other Egyptians, the country has witnessed 2 revolutions in about 2 years and a half, because we're awesome, and we're used to fascinating the world.